Welcome back to the Bible. Wait, what?
I reckon you nailed it for
Getting
the last
there,
one of the
yeah.
day.
Warmed up now. So,
We have been talking for 2.5 hours.
yes. So we are here for chapter 5. So this is now Friday. Hopefully you've had a great week and you've been following along. If you haven't, there's some great different stories to go through, and it's very much about a lot of political and the ideas of what happens when you're getting very the idea of when you're chasing political gain.
Yep.
And
Power plays
and all that sort of stuff.
Disloyalty, all that sort of stuff. All very pertinent in the first 4 chapters of 2 Samuel for sure.
Yeah. So now we're getting into, so we've sort of come out of the civil war that's been happening, the north versus south, Judah versus in northern Israel, and just that's what has been happening through this like the beginning, how it all sort of started, what's been happening through the middle, and to where we are now. So this is where David first up becomes king of Israel.
So this is the better part of 7 years after Saul's death.
Yeah. So it's been and 5 years since.
And 5 years since Ishbosheth's death. Yep.
So there's been a lot of time between, chapter 4 and then chapter 5. It's been this big period of time, which we don't get a lot of writing about.
No, there's no evidence. We were doing a bit of talking in one of the breaks about it, trying to find it out. And the best conjecture is that Israel probably just lived in a time of civil unrest, and no one person, the elders of Israel, but no one person sort of asserting themselves on the throne.
Yep.
Abner's gone, who's probably their last hope. It's just a time of, a bit like the Judges, there's just the lack of rain, and maybe the uncertainty. Many of them would have wanted David to be their king, but did we trust him?
Yeah.
You know, Abner went there and didn't come back. There's just all this kind of unnecessary
the trust disappeared.
Trust has disappeared, yes.
And then it was just that time of of building that back.
And it led to
and they
5
weren't sure
years
of
in the
his
wilderness.
innocence, as well.
All of that.
Yeah.
So this is what sin does.
And there was the fear at the end of chapter 4, wasn't it?
They were
afraid that, he was just going to come and wipe them out pretty much, is what sort of that was implying there, that they weren't sure what was going to happen.
And maybe after 5 years they realised David, credit to Dave, that he still hasn't gone and asserted himself. He's still waited for them to come to him.
Yep. So then all the tribes of Israel went to David at Hebron. So at this point, you can see that the time has now passed. So it's been 5 years. They have seen that, okay, David is innocent of he wasn't the one that killed Abner. He isn't the one that asked for the assassination of
Abner? Mephibosheth. Who are you talking about? Ishbosheth. Yes, correct, yep.
Okay.
Ishbosheth,
that's what I'm doing. I'm mixing those two together.
Yeah, Mephibosheth and Ishbosheth.
Yeah. And so they've, now, like we wanted all along, and like Abner talked us into it, we agreed this was the right thing. They're like, okay, we're going to go back to David now. David's been waiting because he knew that he couldn't just come out and take it. So David's been waiting. We can see that, okay, he's the God's anointed. He's innocent. Okay, we want to now really bring it back in so that we are one big kingdom of Israel. We are now under God.
Yep.
We've got the anointed leader, that sort of thing. So it says, in the past, you are our, they came to him and said, we are your own flesh and blood. In the past, when Saul was our king, you were the one who really led the forces of Israel. And the Lord told you, you will be the shepherd of my people Israel. You will be Israel's leader. So there at Hebron, King David made a covenant before the Lord with all the elders of Israel, and they anointed him king of Israel. So that's the second covenant he made. So he made the first covenant with Abner, saying that I agree, I will be. So you go peacefully.
Now this is all the Israelites.
And this is all Israel have now come. So it wasn't just Abner. The first one was with Abner and on behalf of the people of Israel.
Abner and 20 guys. Now they've all shown up. All the people in authority,
all
the elders
of Israel have come. And then he was then anointed the king of Israel. So David was 30 years old at that point. So when he was chasing Saul, he would have been a teenager into his early 20s.
Yep.
And then when he when Saul died, he would have been about 23 years old.
Yep.
So
all of 1 Samuel, he's a young
boy.
Yeah. Puts it in perspective, doesn't it?
Yeah. I suppose for that, again, we talk about the whole idea of in the context of the time, like at 15, 16, you're getting married, you're head of a household, you're like all of that sort of stuff. So
nonetheless, there's
it's
still
you still
something
are,
on him
yeah,
at probably 18, 19 when he's fleeing from Saul.
Yep.
Even before he's fleeing from Saul, he's already a military leader.
Yeah.
We're talking 16, 17. He's already got something very significant in his life.
That part's not normal.
That's not normal.
So the fact
that's
that
Alexander the Great, not normal. That's
like being normal of being seen as an adult in your late teenage years is normal,
but not that
but
level
not
of influence.
that level of influence.
No, there's something
that level
special
of authority.
about that.
Yeah.
And maybe that was partly what Saul was threatened about, was how does this 16, 17, 18-year-old kid have that level of influence and wisdom
and
about
then
him?
like it must be God.
It has to be God.
And then that's where the fear then took hold.
Totally. Yeah. And so by the time he's 30, I mean, interesting, Alexander the Great died at 30, I think, because he basically died of a broken heart because he reckoned he couldn't conquer anything else. He'd done all his work. So it's a very similar sort of thing. David at 30 is beginning his full reign over everything.
And he reigned 40 years in all. So he reigned over Israel for another 33 years after this.
Yep.
He had reigned over Judah for 7 years and 6 months. And from Jerusalem, he reigned over all Israel and Judah for 33 years.
Yep.
Here we go. I did the maths without having
Did
to
the
do
maths.
it.
Minus 6 months, but it's there.
Yeah.
Yep.
So then we move on. So where David captures Israel. So
Jerusalem.
Oh, Jerusalem, sorry.
Yep.
I was thinking Israel. So he's already king of Israel at this point. So
he's king of Israel, reigning. His throne is in Hebron.
So obviously, even though that the leaders of Israel have anointed him as their king, there were still parts of Israel that maybe didn't accept that yet. If he's going to conquer Jerusalem.
Yes, so Jerusalem doesn't actually belong to the Israelites either.
At that point, yeah. But even though, isn't Jerusalem still in the vicinity of all of that, though?
Very much so. But it's actually still a Canaanite city. So you know how this is really important that we just spend a few minutes on this to give context, because Jerusalem, we need to understand Jerusalem. So there was a story in the book of Judges right at the end of Judges, about how the man goes and gets his concubine, and they go back and they say, let's go back home again after his concubine ran away. And it says, and his servant says to him, let's stop at this city of Jebus, Jebus, which is the city becomes Jerusalem. He goes, no, we're not going to stop in a Canaanite city. We'll go on to Benjamin. We'll go into one of the other towns, one of the Benjamite towns, because the city of Jerusalem is in Benjamite territory. It's not far from where Saul's family was, but it was still a Canaanite town, which means even in this time when you've got a nation of Israel, there are still cities within that. Maybe they're peace treaties, maybe there's kind of alliances, but they're not Israelites.
No.
That's what Jerusalem is. It's a Canaanite city that has not been conquered from the time of the Judges.
Which is fun enough. Weren't they then charged at one time to go and wipe them out?
Yes, and then we're getting into a whole different conversation about what that really means and what the narrative says in the text. But historic archaeology tells us that there is a lot of evidence that many of these people still continued to live within context.
But didn't they normally sort of more assimilate into the culture?
And there was assimilation
more
that took place,
than had their own city smack bang in the middle of their territory.
Quite often that would be the case. So there would be assimilation as well. So there were most of the Philistines lived along the Mediterranean coast, but there was a town, Beth Shan, which was where Saul's body was taken, which is right up, way away from the coast, right up near where Saul was killed. So even then, you got a Philistine town, a Philistine outpost maybe, that's a town surrounded by Israelite territory. So because of city walls and that, they could still do that. And then some people would go, well, they're living at peace. We think of it as being all vicious, but I don't think it always was. If there was peace and there was agreement and taxes paid and allegiances given, it would be okay. And that seems to be something like what's happened with Jerusalem, with Jebus, this town. It happens to be right on the northern border of Judah, but inside Benjamite territory, Benjamin's territory. In fact, the northern border of Judah literally comes up to the bottom of Jebus. It stops at Jebus. The town is immediately north of that. And it's only like 10 k's north of Hebron. But what David is doing here is a political move to establish his kingdom. Because they've come to him in Hebron And he's thinking, if I continue to reign from Hebron, I don't look like I've done enough to come their way.
Yeah.
So what I'll do is I'll move north into Benjamin's territory, and he's going to then win the hearts of the Benjamins because he's giving up something.
Yeah.
He's actually giving up some safety
to do that.
To move in, to show that he's willing to come towards them because he's their shepherd. Remember they said in the past, God called you to be our shepherd.
Yeah.
He's shepherding them. He's caring for them enough to do that. So he comes to this place, this city of Jebus or Jerusalem, the city of the Jebusites, to fight against who were the original inheritance of the land. Now there would have been some. There's no evidence that it's completely antagonistic. They've lived there by this stage. They've lived with Israelites in and around them for a couple of hundred years at least. So they've obviously found some way to make it work. But they've got a very well fortified city, this city of Jerusalem. And that may be partly why Israel never conquered it, because it was incredibly fortified. It's on the side of the hill, the city of David, very hard to get to. The walls, the city of David is surrounded by, Jerusalem is surrounded on three sides by hills, and then there's a fortified wall on top of that. So it's very hard to get at. Yep. And that's what David goes, let's take that city. Yep. And he does that. He goes there, and they say, you'll never get in.
Yeah, you'll never get in here. Even the blind and lame could keep you out. For the Jebusites thought they were safe, but David captured the fortress of Zion, which is now called the city of David.
Yeah. So he took it, and he claimed it. And he didn't get in through the walls. He didn't scale the walls. He didn't have to. No. He found a different way in.
Yeah. So on the day of the attack, so this is one thing we were talking about beforehand, like where David said to his troops, so they just said that even the blind and the lame could keep you out. So then David turned that on them and said to troops, I hate those lame and blind Jebusites, because they pretty much said, well, the blind and the lame keep you out. Well, you are the blind and the lame trying to keep us out.
Trying to keep us out. So let's show you can't keep us out.
Yeah. So whoever attacks them should strike by going into the city through the water tunnel. That is the origin of the saying, the blind and the lame may not enter the house. So that obviously is just the saying that is more just used at this time as more of just probably a local saying. For that time period, they probably had it as a saying then because it would have been relevant to something was current.
It was like used in a derogatory term to say someone was blind and lame. Oh, you'll never amount to anything. Yeah. Or judge other people, and it was turned around. Oh, you're blind and lame. Well, let's show you you're really blind and lame. Yeah. But like in schoolyard when you say my dad can do this. Exactly. It was just like that. I know you are, but what am I? That's exactly what David's doing. That's what we used to say, didn't we? Yeah. I know you are, but what am I? Yeah, and that's what's going on here. And it became used as a derogatory term. Now, you and I, we grew up with these kind of derogatory terms used about people with disabilities and whatever. But I'm grateful we're getting to a point now where we're reaching a point where we recognise that it's not appropriate. I mean, but throughout most of history, it has been. Yeah. But at least now we recognise, no, people are treated with dignity regardless of whether they have a disability. Let's find a different way to slur someone or slander someone. Australians are known for sledging, but to do it in a way that isn't applicable. And it wasn't just the Jews. The Jebusites were saying the blind and the lame. They were using it in a weak way too. Yes. So they captured it through the water tunnel, a water tunnel. It doesn't say it in this version. It must be in the Chronicles version. I think it says, David says, whoever captures the city can have my daughter in marriage.
Yeah. I remember that part. So I think that must be Chronicles.
It must be because it's Joab that leads them.
Yes, it is.
So Joab uses. So this is the thing with Joab. He's a mixed bag. Like he was never had a short of thirst for blood. So clearly, I'm not surprised he's first on the attack and gets in there. But David probably would have slapped himself and gone, "Oh, that's not what I was expecting." Now Joab's even closer to messing me up. So isn't that interesting? Yeah. But they got in through that water tunnel is still there. There's two water tunnels into the city of David. They've found the first. Well, the long one is Hezekiah's tunnel, which will come 300 years later than this. But this one is a little, I think it's named after the guy who found it, an English guy who found it, I think. But you can walk through this tunnel and it gets you in. It was the water tunnel that led in through and into, they found it. Normally they would try to hide water tunnels because you needed to be able to get in and out to get water from outside the city walls. And they would just found this tunnel, up they went inside.
Yeah. So they pretty much just got in there and they overpowered them.
Yep.
Pretty much. They the power because the Lord of God of heaven's armies was with him.
Yep.
So pretty much it was like that God was with David at this time.
Yep.
And helped him take the city, that which they thought was
impenetrable.
Yeah.
A couple more things about Jerusalem. Obviously, this becomes the city of David, and it's actually not inside the walls of the modern day city of Jerusalem. It's actually just south of that. They found the ruins of this place. The modern walls are, the modern walls are much older.
Yeah.
Like as in only 500 years old. But they found this place. But I will add to that in this context of it being the city of David, they didn't demolish and kill everybody in there. There's evidence that they got in and that the city surrendered to them. Because towards the end of the story, we will hear about David wanting to buy a block of land that he can use to create sacrifice to the Lord, which obviously become the Temple Mount where he built the temple. And he buys that off a guy called Araunah the Jebusite.
Yeah.
And the scholars, I didn't know this until a couple of years ago, the Araunah is actually the term used for the king. Like you have...
okay.
Yeah, so it's not a guy's name, it's a title. So this king, this guy Araunah, was very likely the leader, or at least in the royal family of the kingdom of Jebus.
Yep.
And so he has surrendered and has fully integrated.
Yep.
This is that integrated. We read it black and white. It doesn't seem like there's any integration take place, but that's not how it worked in real life. There was integration of the people.
There we go.
So this became David's key city.
Yep.
And he had more sons when he got there.
Yeah. Married more concubines and wives. Okay. When they married a concubine, they became his wife. Anyway.
Yeah. I don't know why that says that. I don't think concubines weren't wives.
Yeah.
No.
I'm guessing that's probably just the English translation in there.
Yeah.
And they had more sons and daughters. These are the names of David's sons who were born. Jerusalem, Shumah, Shoabab, Nathan, Solomon, Ibhar, Elishua.
You want to keep going?
Yeah.
Keep going. You're nearly there.
Nepheg, Japhiah, Elishama, Eliada,
yeah,
and Eliphelet. No,
well done. Yeah, that'll do. Eliphelet. Yeah,
Eliphelet. Yeah. So,
which is
more
just
sons.
More of what happened in chapter 4.
Yeah,
It's this
more. He became there and became more stronger and stronger.
And stronger. Yep. He's now got very strong, and now because he's now solidified on the throne of all of Israel, and he's got a royal family, a dynasty forming.
Yep.
He's now at a point where he can turn his attention back to the Philistines again.
So, and which, if we harken back to chapter 1, where Saul's death actually happened in the battle against the Philistines.
That's correct.
So that battle has sort of been sitting
7
in the
years
background.
In the past. Yep. And the Philistines were probably quite happy.
Yep.
Because David hadn't been coming after them.
Yep.
The Israel wasn't in a position to fight them.
Yep.
But now they've got a serious threat on their hands. So they launch a preemptive strike against David.
Yeah. So when they heard that David had been anointed king over Israel, they mobilized their forces to capture him. But David was told of their coming, and he went into the stronghold. The Philistine army arrived and spread across the valley of Rephaim. So David asked the Lord, "Should I go and fight the Philistines? Will you hand them over to me?" And the Lord replied to David, "Yes, go ahead. I will certainly hand them over to you." So David went to Baal Perazim and defeated the Philistines there. The Lord did it, David exclaimed. He burst through through my enemies like a raging flood. So he named the place Baal Perazim, which means the Lord who bursts through. The Philistines had abandoned their idols there, so David and his men confiscated them. But after a while, the Philistines returned and again spread across the valley of Rephaim. And again, David asked the Lord what to do. "Do not attack them straight on," the Lord replied. "Instead, circle around behind and attack them near the poplar trees. When you hear a sound like marching feet in the tops of the poplar trees, be on alert. That will be the signal that the Lord is moving ahead of you to strike down the Philistine army. So David did what the Lord commanded, and he struck down the Philistines all the way from Gibeon to Gezer.
So he's actually got a degree of victory now
Yep.
over his enemy, over the Philistines.
Yeah, twice.
Twice. Yeah, he's subdued the Philistines under his rule.
Yep.
Is what's happened.
Yeah, where before it was a lot of back and forth.
Yeah.
There was no clear. It was
Well, actually, it was the other way around. Even in the time of Saul, Philistines ruled Saul.
Yeah.
Even though Saul, you said it was
Yeah.
you said it was a very small nation. It was, and it was
Yeah.
under Philistine rule because in the early chapters of 1 Samuel, when Saul is king, there's a story about Jonathan and his armor bearer fighting a Philistine garrison, and it says in the entire army of Israel, only Saul and Jonathan were allowed to have a sword.
Yeah.
The rest of them had plowshares, and
Yeah.
he said, and any time they needed to get them sharpened, their plowshares sharpened, they had to go down to the Philistines and pay for it.
Yeah.
So the Philistines were very much the stronger
Yeah.
party during the time of Saul. This is the first sign of that reversal taking place.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the Philistines will come under David and ultimately under Solomon's authority from
Yeah.
here on in. And they are regarded as the primary enemy pretty much through the life of Saul
Yeah.
and into David. Yeah. So that sets it up for David now moving the ark next week into Jerusalem, and then it all looks good for the next 2, 3 chapters, 4 chapters, and then it all comes off the rails after that. So thanks for being with me today and this week, Jimmy.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Always appreciate our chats. And have a great week, everyone. Talk to you next time.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Bible. Wait, what? Be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast so you don't miss a single episode. And you can also find us on all the socials. Just search The Bible. Wait, what? And to find out more about our church, just search C3 Camden, C3 Picton, or C3 Thirroul on the web or on the socials. Thanks for being with us today, and we look forward to talking to you on the next episode of The Bible. Wait, what?